Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the summit. Hope you had a good break. We have had a really packed set of sessions today so far. We've talked about Passkeys 101. We've looked at the state of the market. We've looked at Passkeys in workforce environments, and we've looked at Passkeys in consumer environments. So what logically would come next is using Passkeys and FIDO in government environments. And particularly today, we're going to be focusing on the US government. So I'm really happy to have with us Teresa Wu from IDEMIA and Joe Scalone from Yubico. They are not only with those companies, but they are also the co-chairs of our government deployment working group. And we're very thankful to have them to help us drive forward FIDO in governments all over the world, and also particularly in the US government. So welcome, Teresa and Joe, and I will leave it to you to kick things off.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you. Thank you for having us. So, like Megan said, Joe and I has been tag teaming. We are co-chair of the Government Deployment Working Group and also the newly formed U.S. Government Deployment Working Group subgroup. And just a little high level, what GDWG do and stand for. We are trying to be the group of SME that have been working with government or the government representation themselves in discussing how to deploy all the different related topic around FIDO authentication around the world. It's not just GDWG is not just US focused, it's global. We're interested in how the government around the world deploy FIDO authentication. And we would publish in the different use cases, consumer-facing, citizen-facing, or workforce use cases. And recently, we actually started with a special working group at the request of the U.S. government agencies, and then we further down maturing it and create U.S. GDWG. So that's in a nutshell what is GDWG. We welcome members to join. And you can connect with Joe and I if you want to learn more about GDWG or US GDWG. So Joe, you want to talk about some of the work you have done with GDWG?
Yeah, we've developed several white papers over the years within the GDWG. We're looking at both the government to citizen and the government to government use cases worldwide in the GDWG. Specifically within the US GDWG subgroup, we did come out with a white paper relatively recently about a guidance for the US government deployment of FIDO. So let's go ahead to the next slide. Teresa, do you want to go ahead and talk about some of those use cases that we saw?
Yes. So it was a working group that did a lot of discussion. So the white paper sort of try to address that. It's a very good way, sort of a starting discussion. We talk about the government enterprise. Of course, we talk about device balance passkey, and the concern and use cases and how to address supply chain or the country of origin topic. FIP 140 and the attestation. And some other use cases we of course there are other use cases where the government have citizen-facing application. So you have also bring your own authenticator or sync passkey. So FIDO authentication have many use cases in government. And in the US government, for those that are not aware, there is the federal government has what we call PIV, personal identification verification, PIV, according to the FIPS 201 standard. It's a standardized way of identify federal employee and contractor with a specific format of ID card that do both logical access control as well as physical access control. But it has a very standardized way of doing identity verification first, validation application before you get to issue a PIV. So some of the use cases that we can see FIDO can complement that PIV process is to do something before even a PIV credential is issued or when a PIV credential is not needed, and how to address the remote workers and addressing some of the barriers to using smart card or PKI to complement that. Even though smart card can have different form factor, but in essence, FIDO can be used in the federal government space, in the U.S. government space, to get rid of password. Right at the end, that's the angle. And I think the MFA, we think the MFA feel equal, but it's not. Multi-factor authentication, some are actually not phishing resistant, and some are. And I think it's important to make that delineation that some MFA, some form of MFA that we thought it's better than nothing. It's better than password for sure, but it's still weak and is prone to phishing attack. And it's not gonna be, with the increasing threats of a cybersecurity attack and phishing attack, we're going to be more vulnerable. So there are other more phishing resistant. So your PIVCR, your PKI base is a phishing resistant authenticator. So is Passkey, and the hardware based token, how we'll call device bound Passkey.
So we're not the only people that have noticed that not all MFA is created equal. Our friends at NIST have meticulously outlined digital identity guidelines within the federal space, setting the standard for agencies. While adhering to these standards, there exists a degree of flexibility for agents to discern really their optimal path forward. The OMB has further distilled these guidelines, urging agencies to embrace a contemporary, agile, and standards-based identity solution as an integral component of establishing a zero-trust model. Additionally, OMB has made a plea for all agencies to embrace MFA or multi-factor authentication that is resistant to all phishing attempts. We've seen this through multiple different both NIST and presidential actions, outlining the government to move toward a zero trust environment and also to use phishing resistant authentication. So in response to this imperative, agencies really are asked to proactively implement phishing resistant MFA by the conclusion of this fiscal year, marking a pivotal step in their journey toward a zero trust environment. Their policies really allow for the incorporation of FIDO authentication as a complementary architecture to PIV. However, it really is up to each agency to make that commitment to take action and implement this advanced security measure. Go ahead to the next slide, Teresa. So really, there are a couple things that have to be done first before we can really talk about FIDO. Some agencies really need to adopt a single sign-on program, in order to really move to a strong zero trust environment. Single sign-on is one of the major pillars. M2209 really recognizes this and calls out that no user should be trusted and all authentication should happen at the application level. Also called out, just to note that all users should only be authorized for the data they are allowed to have access to according to that data classification level. That level is determined by NIST's DERA process and will really determine the appropriate assurances and levels as written in NIST 863. The identities are validated and should be equipped with use of phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication. Also, as part of M2209, you must adopt an integrated lifecycle management system, and you're following all current standards and leveraging the current infrastructure wherever possible. Just a reminder, zero trust really is a journey that needs to consider all unique requirements, environments, and missions that many government agencies face. Teresa, do you want to talk more about how FIDO can help government agencies?
So this is thank you, Joe. So this is, Joe is correct. I think there are different, it's a roadmap to happen. There's to be planned. There are other steps that needs to happen first. So one thing we're trying to do in the white paper is laying out the different steps, how to go to the next level. So once you have your SSO and you have your policy and your roadmap, that assessment done, what's the next step to do? We're trying to make this as actionable as possible from the paper that you can download from the FIDO website. So one thing an agency can do, and honestly, this can apply to not just U.S. government. This can apply to state and local government, to other government in the country. I think this is pretty generic that we can the other government agency can follow. The first thing first is select your authenticator. Look at your DERA, right? Your assessment to see what assurance level you need to do, what the operational challenges, and pick the right authenticator modality. Maybe it's app-based, maybe it's device-based, maybe it's both, maybe smart card is enough because you're already issuing smart card to your employees. So having that options being assessed first to choose your authenticator, and I would say one size doesn't fit all. Pick the right one according to your operational challenges. Then that's sort of like step one. Then step two, or step number two with a lot of sub-steps, is how to plan your life cycle and user journey, right? Determine how the authoritative identity record is going to be bound between your PKI or the FIDO credentials at the different assurance level. Do you need the FIPS certification or not? And finding if you are a federal government agency, how does that bind to the 800 and 157? So those are like the policy side of the aspect of the journey. Get that settled, get that defined, determine where you're gonna verify the identity. Then the number two step would be determine the FIDO registration flow. How you're gonna with attestation, backup authenticator. Then the step three in that SSO integration, right? How you're gonna leverage that to help with your zero trust journey. And the last one, the IAM process, right? Determine how you're managing your PIV credential and your FIDO credential together, and how you do the recovery. So step two is a lot of planning, a lot of policy, but they're important to roll this out because you have a lot of moving parts in there. And then three step is deploy. I know we just say deploy. I'm sure it's more than that. We are sure it's more than that. But I think we are focusing on that sort of the actions on the planning piece.
So we also in the paper really broke down what that specific user journey would be, including looking at both a scenario where you may not have a PIV card, you may not be eligible for a PIV card, or just your background check and the process to get you a PIV is not complete yet, because in some cases that can take multiple months. So really your first step of this journey is really to create, a non-PIV digital identity record. That really flows through to in-person proofing biometrics capture, which is similar to every bit of registration that is done now as part of the PIV process. Having a good identity proofing solution really assures the person who is using that authenticator is who they say they are. And then you go into the FIDO registration and issuance. If you're on the no PIV side, that's relatively easy. You hand over the FIDO token, you set up a method of account recovery, potentially a backup key. You make sure you've got a plan for offboarding and revocation in place, and you're good to go. On the PIV side, if you're able to receive a PIV, you go through a couple additional steps that we recognized. Are you suitable for that PIV? Is PIV the right solution for you? When are you going to be able to get it? That background check, did it go through? Did you pass your background check? Can you get a PIV in your specific scenario? And then obviously the biometric comparison with your enrollment record. At all times, you must go back to that identity proofing. So then you create that PIV card, activate the PIV card, and then create a FIDO credential derived off of that PIV card. I know it looks like a lot of steps. In some cases, these steps are all combined into the same action. We just wanted to make sure that we spelled it out so everybody kind of knew really what needed to happen at every step, and to show that adding FIDO into the registration process that is already there wouldn't be that challenging or hard. Teresa, did you want to add any input on this slide?
I guess it's yes. I guess there's these two things. You have PIV, non-PIV. Like when you're in a non-PIV scenario today, the options feels like it's only password. And what we want to say is no, you don't have passwords is not only alternative when you don't have a PIV card. The alternative is using a FIDO authenticator. It's much better, phishing resistant, more secure than password. So I think that at the minimum is when you feel like that there's no PIV alternative. There is a PIV alternative. I'm saying substituting PIV. I think it's very important. The FIDO Alliance is not saying that the FIDO authenticator can replace PIV. It's definitely not the intent of the paper. I think a lot of people come across thinking that way, but we are not here to replace PIV. We are here to supplement and use FIDO where PIV is not covered, or some of the people are not PIV eligible, and you are better off giving them a FIDO authenticator than just a password. So I want to highlight that because that sometimes get miscommunicated. We are not. Yes, PIV has its challenges and use, but it's a phishing resistant authenticator. It is a federal government standard, so there's no visibility in sight that it's going away, right? And FIDO have no legitimacy to replace it. But think about the non-PIV use cases.
When really the government at this point has also said by the end of this year, even if you are not PIV eligible, you must have a phishing resistant authenticator.
All right.
So
that's
either
the different population, low hanging fruit, right? So it's sort of like you tackle the password.
Right. I mean, really making sure that you have phishing resistant users across and phishing resistant authenticators for your users across the whole breadth of the federal government really is going to make sure that there is no weak spot within the authentication chain.
Yes. All right. So what's next step as a working group? What we want to do? I think the paper is the first step. We keep doing outreach, trying to educate. And we plan to do as a working group additional documentation or even organize workshop to get feedback. Because I think that step 3 deploy, we get a lot of like, well, it's really not that easy. So and since we are the deployment working group, what can we do? What can we help? Can we align on certain things? So I think those are the working group activity we're doing, right? To trying to refine that that step 3, right? The deploy step. But we welcome feedback and questions. You can send those to feedback@fidoalliance.org. And Joe, I will let you finish this for the call to actions.
Thank you. So what we need from you, if you're within a government agency, and really for a lot of commercial industries as well that work with the government, is we'd love for you to integrate FIDO authentication to complement PIV really as part of your ICAM and zero trust journeys. But we understand that that might be a little bit of a leap. So if you've got questions, please come join us in the working group. We are only as good as the information we get back. Also, make sure to discuss FIDO and Passkeys with your agency leadership. It's important to start discussing that there are other methods out there that have been approved for phishing-resistant authentication. And back to that, tell us about what your challenges are. We've got a large breadth of knowledge within our working group and experience, and have seen many challenges that when somebody comes in to ask a question, we usually have experienced it multiple times before and can give you multiple perspectives. Also, it's nice to hear from all of our agency friends whenever possible. All right, Tracy, you want to hit the next slide? Anybody have any questions for us?
All right, it took me a second to come back. We do have some questions. So I think the point of questions, we might want to pull the, actually, I don't know if we can do that if we're all here. There was some like clarifications needed. So level setting, okay. So we're at a Passkeys event. We're talking about FIDO. In the definition, the newer terminology, the recommendations in the paper are for device-bound passkeys, specifically those housed on security keys, right? Okay.
Yes. It's
So
device-bound
just wanted to make
passkey.
sure that, because there's been a couple of questions about registration of synced passkeys, and that's just not in scope for what you're looking at right now.
Not the paper that we publish. I think it's sort of the scope we're gonna keep working towards, collaborating with the other working group to look at how that will impact the government. But no, the paper that we publish, it's only for device-bound passkey, and device-bound passkey or the security can be in a smart card format or a USB key format, or for example. But yes, it's not sync passkey. It's in the paper.
And we
Right.
also really
And
look
then-
forward to guidance from NIST on how to handle synced passkeys, what level of authenticator they will be seen within the federal government.
Yeah, and I think that looking at the citizen services side will be a nice thing to do too, with regard to sync passkeys. But for the purposes of this paper, right, it's device-bound passkeys. And then again, from a clarification perspective, when we talk about, PIV eligible and non-PIV eligible folks, or so the question a little more broadly is, what class of folks are we recommending FIDO as complementary?
I don't think we break it down to a specific class of folks, because I feel like there's a use case for anybody and everybody. You think of it just from the operational intelligence aspect. I make the joke that when you go to a conference, you can tell every person who's a government employee because there's CAC cards sticking out of the side of their computer. If it weren't, you wouldn't know that. That's a large group of people that you could technically say is a market there. At the same time, as a backup authenticator derived off your PIV is another place that they can be used, in addition to obviously the non-PIV scenario.
So I think, if I may, I would say there are what we call federal contractor or employee that are not PIV eligible based on their job categories, or because they never need to go to surrender themselves to a federal facility, for example. And that's why they don't really need a PIV card, but they do work for the government, and therefore they need secure access. And today they will just issue a password and use a password to access some government system. So I think that the FIDO use cases, it's important that you know who are your population. So you have population that actually doesn't get issued a PIV card, and today they are using a password. So that I think that's the simplest way to categorize that population is a really good population to start using FIDO Authenticator with. And then you can have, I would say, some government to citizen services, where passkey will be better than password to secure and access the citizen accessing government system or information, or have data hosted in those systems.
Thank you. And then the question about PIV-I came up. So what is FIDO compared to like a PIV-I credential?
Well, simply put, PI is a PKI authentication credentials, right? It's PI. It's basically a form of PIV, but for a different purpose. FIDO authenticator, it's not a PKI authenticator, right? So, I mean, it's two different kind of authentication. They both phishing resistant. It's just that the PIV-I have challenges associated with deploying a PKI infrastructure. Joe, you want to add to it, or do I get it?
Yeah, because I think the question is like, well, if I'm, not in evaluating credentials for like non-PIV eligible folks, to me, it sounds like the infrastructure piece would be kind of a challenge compared to issuing a FIDO credential, but I don't want to put any words in your mouth.
I mean, in a lot of cases, I believe PIV-I is used for people that don't have to go through the same vetting processes.
But they still
FIDO
use that
would be an option.
But they still use that as an identity badge too, right? People
Correct.
forget that PIV-I, Twig card, they are at the first function is an identity card, which FIDO authentication key never meant to do it. However, it is possible to put a FIDO authenticator on a smart card, right? So you can use that as an ID badge and a FIDO authenticator. You can have both. It doesn't have either way. I would argue, being provocative here, why don't you have a PI and FIDO on the same card? Then you cover both sides, having the maximum tools in your disposal to help with your security posture. It's not either or kind of scenario. Sometimes you can have both. To pick the best tool at your disposal to protect your network and your digital asset. I would say have both.
Why not both?
Why not both?
There's a question about how to join the GDWG.
Good question. So if you are a sponsor member or a board member, you just need to join the membership portal on Causeway, right? The member.fidoalliance.org, and create a member account, and then you can pick the working group you want to join and pick it and join, and it will get mailed into approval process. If you're associate members, reach out to one of us and we can discuss further and get you invited to joining the GDWG. So that's the FIDO Alliance processes. But it's the working group are for member only. But your U.S. government needs actually sign what we call a government membership agreement with FIDO Alliance. So you just need to reach out to us. We can connect you with the NIST contact that we have, and you can join us as a government representative.
Thank you. And we also we can follow up on that question with the written directions too, because there's just it's easy, but there's just a couple steps.
Yeah.
So I think that's been great. I think we're at the end of the questions, but thank you so much, Joe and Teresa. We're really looking forward to, again, continuing to promote the great work in this paper and looking forward to what's coming next from the working group, especially for the U.S. government. So thank you so much for being here with us today and giving us that great overview. We are just going to take a little bit of a pause until our next session. So we'll see you back here at 2:30 Eastern.